Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. This year the government launched an unprecedented attack on fairness. This year the government attacked the living standards of Australian families, a new petrol tax, a GP tax, $100,000 degrees. This year the government's cutting pensions, cut the real wages of our ADF and is cutting $80 billion from schools and hospitals. But isn't the Prime Minister's greatest achievement this year breaking nearly every one of his election promises?
I call the Honourable the Prime Minister.
Well, Madam Speaker, let's go through the commitments that we made.
Put them all down. It is so childish. Give them into the... They'll all be given... The Prime Minister has the call. Those props will not surface again, or they'll be handed in immediately to the attendants. The Prime Minister has the call.
Well, thanks, Madam Speaker. And, Madam Speaker, let's just go through the commitments that were made. That we'd repeal the carbon tax, that we'd stop the votes, that we'd build the roads of the 21st century, and that we would get the budget back under control.
I know this is Thursday, but there'll be silence for the Prime Minister's answer. The Prime Minister has the call.
The carbon tax is gone, but the compensation stays, and every family is $550 a year.
The member for Wakefield.
Madam Speaker, the votes have stopped, and that means that hundreds of people are no longer dying at sea. The roads are building, and that means that millions of Australians won't be wasting so many hours of every day and week in traffic jams. And, Madam Speaker, the task of budget repair is underway. It is well and truly underway. It's being sabotaged at every turn by the Leader of the Opposition.
Grainler and the member
Madam
for
Speaker,
Parliamentary.
this Leader of the Opposition is someone who is trashing our country to help himself. That's exactly what he's doing, and it is unworthy of him. It's unworthy of the party that he leads. It's unworthy of great Labor leaders like Bob Hawke and Paul Keating, with whom this side of the parliament had many disagreements, but one thing they would never do was shirk taking the difficult but necessary decisions to give our country the fiscal foundation that it enjoyed up until 2007.
I call the honourable member for Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My questions to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister please update the House on the actions that this government's taken to build a stronger future for all Australians?
I call the honourable the Prime Minister.
Well, Madam Speaker, I do thank the member for Solomon for a question, and undoubtedly, Madam Speaker,
the member for Port Adelaide
has been a year of achievement for our country, and it's been a year of delivery for our government. Madam Speaker, the G20 was an opportunity to showcase Australia to the world. I congratulate the people of Brisbane for their work in doing precisely that. But not only did we showcase our country to the world, we actually secured pledges on jobs and growth from the 20 largest economies in the globe, which will work to the benefit of people in this country and everywhere. And, Madam Speaker, the 3 free trade agreements that have been finalised with our largest trading partners will set our country up for the future. It means more jobs, it means higher growth, it's good for consumers and it's good for our exporters. And, Madam Speaker, as for this government, we are delivering, Madam Speaker. The carbon tax repeal, delivered. The mining tax repeal, delivered. Stopping the boats, Madam Speaker, delivered. Delivered in spades. The free trade agreements about which governments have procrastinated for a decade, delivered, Madam Speaker. Big new road projects going ahead. The Green Army deploying around our country, restoring degraded bush and cleaning up polluted waterways. New Colombo plant scholars fanning out through our region, and the national broadband network rolling out only now on realistic timetables and with a realistic budget. And, Madam Speaker, the great task of budget repair, it is well and truly underway, notwithstanding constant sabotage from members opposite. And, Madam Speaker, this is not just a matter of ticking boxes. It's about delivering for the people of Australia. The carbon tax repeal means $550 a year in the pockets of the average household. Stopping the boats means that people are no longer dying at sea. New roads mean that people are not wasting hours of their day and their week in traffic jams. Of course, Madam Speaker, there's more to do, but when it comes to some of the most intractable problems our country has faced, the boats and the budget, these problems are now being tackled with a clarity of purpose and a strength of character which has long been lacking. And, Madam Speaker, we are getting the fundamentals right. Sure, there are challenges, but challenges are things that the Australian people always rise to meet. This has been a year when we build the foundations, and next year we build further on them, doing what we are elected to do, to build a strong and prosperous economy for a safe and secure Australia.
I call the honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. My question's to the Prime Minister. Does he honestly believe that he would be in the Lodge today if the night before the last election he had been straight with the Australian people and said up front to them, yes, there will be cuts to education, yes, there will be cuts to health, yes, there will be changes to pensions, yes, there will be changes to the GST, yes, there will be cuts to the ABC and SBS?
The Leader of the House will desist. The Prime Minister has the call.
Well, Madam Speaker, on health, on public hospitals, spending up 9% this year, 9% next year, 9% the year after that, and 6% in the final year. On schools, Madam Speaker, spending up 8% this year, 8% next year, 8% the year after that, and 6% in the final year. And, Madam Speaker, pensions go up every year, twice a year, every year. They go up twice a year, every year. That's what they do. And, Madam Speaker, sure, Madam Speaker.
There'll be silence.
There are some quite modest cuts to the ABC. There are some quite modest savings that we are expecting from the ABC. But members opposite seems to think that this is some kind of a fraught moment. Well, Madam Speaker, members opposite went into the election saying that the deficit would be $18 billion. It turned out to be $48 billion, Madam Speaker.
How about that?
What members opposite said was an $18 billion deficit turned out to be $48 billion. That's a $30 billion black hole that members opposite created. A $30 billion black hole that members opposite created and tried to cover up. That's exactly what happened, Madam Speaker. Now, Madam Speaker, when circumstances change, intelligent governments react accordingly. When circumstances change, intelligent governments react accordingly. We will restore the budget situation. We will not continue the intergenerational theft that members opposite were guilty of. We will not commit these crimes against our children and grandchildren that members opposite were creating. That's what we're elected to do, and that's what we are delivering on.
Withdraw. Prime Minister will resume his seat. The member for Isaacs will withdraw.
I'll withdraw.
I call the honourable member for Leichhardt.
Madam Speaker, my question is to the Treasurer. Will the Treasurer outline to the House how the government has laid down strong foundations for future prosperity over the past year?
I call the honourable Treasurer.
Well, I thank the honourable member for Leichhardt for his question.
The member for Wakefield is pushing his luck.
And recognise that over the last 12 months, economic growth in Australia strengthened from 1.9% under Labor in the previous 12 months to 2.7% in the last 12 months. So the economy is strengthening under the coalition. I also recognise that over the course of this year, job growth has been running at twice the speed, over 12,000 new jobs a month compared to 5,000 new jobs a month under Labor. And of course, there is much more work to be done.
The member for Port Adelaide, I'll remind, has been warned.
But I am encouraged by retail trade figures that were released today that indicate that this is the 5th consecutive month of increasing retail trade, and we are now seeing retail trade up 0.4% in October, which is a good result and sends a good message about Christmas. Now, this is not an accident. It has come about because we have undertaken the necessary reforms to get the economy going. As the Prime Minister said, we have done everything we can and will do more to ensure that the budget is fixed, the budget is repaired, and that every Australian in 10 years' time does not end up with a debt left from Labor of $25,000 per person. And at the same time, we have delivered the largest infrastructure package in Australia's history, the equivalent of 8 snowy mountain schemes to be built in new additional infrastructure over the next decade. We have facilitated significant state microeconomic reform, and that microeconomic reform means they're redeploying capital from existing state assets into new productive state assets. We got rid of the carbon tax, which cut electricity prices. We got rid of the mining tax, which went on to give incentives back to people who want to invest in mining. We removed $2 billion of red tape, 57,000 pages of legislation. We've signed 3 new free trade agreements. We've abolished 76 different government bodies and boards. We've approved 300 new major projects, going up to $1 trillion of new investment. We've fixed the problem with employee share schemes. We've dealt with the taxation backlog of 100 announced but undealt with different tax initiatives. And what's the response of Labor? What's the response of Labor? Bill Shorten's proud of this year. He says 2014 has been defined by the force of Labor's resistance. Labor has been resisting everything that we have tried to do to make Australia stronger and better. Labor is actually standing in front of the Parliament as we try and put...
Members' time. Until there's silence, I will not be calling the member for Ballarat. In that case, those on my right will also be silent. I call the honourable member for Ballarat.
Thank you very much. And my question is, of course, to the Prime Minister. Why did the Prime Minister lie to Australians and then, before the election, and then...
Take a seat, Leader. That is totally inappropriate behaviour, and the member will leave under 94A. The member for Sydney on a point of order.
Madam Speaker, I was sitting directly behind the member. I could not hear the question because the microphone was switched off. Can you advise why the microphone was switched off at that time?
Yes, because I asked her to resume her seat, which you can do sequentially. I call it the manager of opposition business.
I'm trying to work out what the member for Ballarat was thrown out for.
I think you know.
No, we don't, Madam Speaker. Point of order.
The member will resume his seat. The member will resume his seat. You're not entitled to ask. I will warn the member for Isaacs.
Madam Speaker, point of order in terms of the form of the question.
The manager of opposition business on a point of order.
I'm asking whether, given the form of the question used the word lie, which you have not previously ruled out, is that why the member has been expelled? Previously you've ruled that the word liar is unacceptable,
the member, there is no
but
point
lie
of order.
you have
the member
allowed.
will resume his seat. I call the member for Calare.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Will the Treasurer outline the importance of putting the budget on a sustainable path back to surplus?
I call the Treasurer.
Well, I thank the honourable member for Calare for that question. And the member for Calare knows, as we know, as the Australian people know,
the Treasurer will
that it is
resume his
vitally
seat. Treasurer will resume his seat. I heard a chorus coming from the back row up there, or the second back row, using unparliamentary language. Whoever used it. Then we'll have silence. We'll have silence, and we'll call the Treasurer. The Honourable Treasurer has the call. And we're not putting up with a wall of noise again. Treasurer has the call.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. It is vitally important if we are to deliver an economic action strategy that strengthens the Australian economy, helps us to be more robust in the face of external shocks. It is vitally important that we start to repair the mess left by the previous Labor government, and nothing illustrates that more than the state of the budget. I mean, the member for Lilly stood at this dispatch box and pledged to the Australian people he was delivering 4 years of surpluses. Labor never delivered a surplus. Labor actually would never have delivered a surplus, and that is because they locked in expenditure that kept growing and growing and growing against a revenue base that was never going to meet that target. And as a result, we've had to make difficult decisions. We know they're difficult, but they are so vitally important in the medium and long term to ensure that as a nation we live within our means. Labor's legacy after 10 years would have been $667 billion of government debt. $667 billion of government debt. 70% of that is owed by the Australian people to people overseas. That's what it means. We have to repay that money back with interest. And in 10 years' time, every Australian born, every child born would start life with $25,000 of debt as a result of what Labor did in just 6 years. So now the burden has fallen on us, and we are up to the task. We are determined to fix the budget mess Labor left behind. Whatever the budget numbers, as of today, they'd be $43 billion worse as a result of what this Leader of the Opposition has done and said. $43 billion worse. They are opposing $28 billion of savings. $5 billion of those savings are in fact what they promised the Australian people at the last election. They lied to the Australian people because they're